how to do this because every time I kind of forget a little bit. Let's see. I need to find the link. Oh, here we go. Copy link. Okay, perfect. And then go back over to Patreon. Let's Patreon. Hopefully they get it. Yeah, still a little bit iffy on how to conduct these lives, technically speaking. We're kind of getting used to the Patreon YouTube combo team, so that takes a little bit more practice. Now, I think I'm also going to try to, from my iPad, log on to Patreon and maybe let people know, because I know that that's, it sends an email and it also like updates the actual page, but it doesn't like alert everybody in those individual tiers, which is a bit frustrating, but you know, that's how it goes. So just give me 1 minute to see if I can send people a quick message. Because I'm pretty sure every time I have to do this, it takes me a little bit of time to figure out how I am, how I can actually do it. For whatever reason, it's hard for me to remember. But here we go. Okay, so I think I can message everybody. So I'll say, hey guys, June 4th. Let's see. Wednesday, June 4th. Live is on now. Just as a reminder. Smiley face. Okay, so hopefully that will help remind people if they're interested in showing up. So now, in the meantime, I think I'm going to just start maybe pulling some cards and talking about their meanings. I know I had a couple of people on Patreon who were interested in coming and talking about some specific issues. So let's see. Which deck do I want to use? I don't know. It's hard for me not to just go to the most recent deck I've done. Like, I was exclusively using the Children of Litha when I first made that. And then as soon as I made the Nameless one, I started exclusively using the Nameless one. And now that the Children of Ostara is here, I keep using the Children of Ostara. So I think that's just kind of my mindset because it's the deck that's so fresh on my mind. Obviously, having spent the last 4 years working on it, you know, pretty intensively. So there's that. Yeah. So I'll just draw some cards and talk about some meanings. Oh, it's also interesting too because, like, I don't know. Well, we'll just keep it focused on the tarot. So as I'm waiting, we'll draw some cards for some people. Okay, so I just drew the Lovers reversed. I'll flip it up so you can see the proper imagery here. But we have like two little fae creatures. One is, man, my iPhone camera is so not as good as it used to be, I think. Anyway, so one of them is actually the maple tree right here, and the other one is kind of an insect, and it's sort of merging into the tree. And then we have the classic allusion to the Garden of Eden with the snake between the lovers, the fires of passion, if you will. We have mountains or foundation. We have water and emotion, but it's rising up into the air. It's really fun because just recently on Patreon, I released a preview of what will be the Lover's equivalent card in my tarot deck, the Onyx Tarot, the black and white tarot deck. And so I was talking all about how, you know, the Lovers is actually associated with the zodiac sign Gemini, and how the archetype of Gemini is not one about love, but about union and separation. It's really about duality, right? And all the different things a pair can do. Hey, Carly. Yeah, I did start early because I was just, I wanted to try and see if I can get everything working online, you know? Usually I struggle for whatever reason remembering how to connect the YouTube live to the Patreon, so it always takes me a couple minutes to figure it out. And since my son had a little school ceremony dance thing this morning, I was already feeling kind of rushed. I didn't want to be late. So I thought, well, it's better early than late. I can just, you know, start pulling some cards and talking about that until people show up if they choose. Yeah, that's never a bad idea. It's never a bad idea for me because I can't keep linear reality to be on my a focal point in my conscious awareness. Hello, so nice to see you. So if anybody has any questions, I was just pulling cards and talking about the tarot, and it's kind of funny because I got the Lovers reversed, and so I was talking about how I just recently uploaded this a preview of the Lover's card for my black and white tarot deck called the Onyx Tarot, except in that deck it's called Union, and I changed it because I wanted to keep the emphasis on union, which implies both that there is more than one other thing going on, and Gemini is about duality, and Gemini is associated with the Lover's card. I wrote this whole write-up about it and everything. But also because, you know, a union does still have a connotation of coming together, seeing eye to eye, understanding the other, which can be manifested in like an actual relationship. So it doesn't lose the kind of typical tarot associations you might give, but it does open it up, right? Because you can come together in union internally or externally in many different ways. So, anyways, oh my God, please let's ask about my housing situation. Oh, hi, Alicia. Hi, guys. Yeah, so I won't spend too much more time talking about the Lover's card, but that's what I pulled before y'all showed up. I pulled the Lover's card, apparently. Oh, and it was reversed, by the way. The reverse Lover's card, the Empress reversed, the Eight of Wands reversed, which is all like very makes sense to me, but the Moon reversed, that's so fun. The Queen of Swords reversed and the Six of Swords reversed. Look at all of this like stuck and don't know what to do energy we got going on. Although it is kind of funny because I was just pulling tarot cards waiting for you guys to show up. So it was like, yeah, you know, this is sort of, I don't know where to go from here, kind of stalling out. Okay. So we're going to talk, because Carlisle came first and asked, we're going to talk about her housing situation. So that sounds fun. So I know we talked about the astrology earlier, but I need all the reassurance I can get right now. LOL, sure. Yeah, it's never a bad thing to consult tarot and astrology both. To be honest, I was having this conversation with my astrology book club that I'm currently a part of, and they were asking me about tarot and how it relates to astrology. And I was like, well, tarot and astrology both have some serious strengths and some serious weaknesses. And actually, Austin Coppock, whose course I'm taking right now, he has a lecture on tarot and astrology, which I found very useful. Like a lot of his delineations for the cards, I had literally had like the exact same experience, you know, like I think he described something that really stuck out to me was the Three of Cups. The way that he described the Three of Cups is like the Mercury ruled decan of Cancer, and how like people communicate emotionally without necessarily needing the words to make sense after they have a certain level of like intimacy and familiarity, you know, like when friends are just they like start, you know, like they're just like super happy and they're like squealing and screaming and saying a bunch of nonsense, but everybody kind of gets it because they're like a part of that group. And it was funny because I had literally not even, I don't remember when, but before taking that class, I had recently had an experience where it was very similar to that. I went out and I saw three teenage girls at Starbucks, literally three girls with three cups, just like chatting it up and squealing and just like having the most nonsensical conversation ever. And it made me very nostalgic for a time when I also felt like I had that kind of relationship with people, specifically a friendly, you know, a peer relationship with friends like that. And so it was funny when he was talking about anyway, the point is, tarot and astrology have some serious weaknesses and some serious strengths. Like astrology is a sterile celestial clock. No matter what happens, it's, you know, it's doing its course. And so one of the benefits, of course, is it's zoomed out, it's objective. It's very consistent, and you can go as far into the future or as far into the past as you want. And if your data is correct, you know, your coordinates, time, date, location, all of that will all be the same. And astrology can be incredibly nuanced. You know, you can get into the decans, you can get into the degrees or the 12th parts, or, you know, the transits and all these things. So it definitely can speak to an individual on an individual level. But at the same time, it is that distance and that removal that kind of can sometimes be a certain type of weakness, right? Like it can tell you a kind of event is occurring, but it doesn't really tell you how you're going to feel about it necessarily. It doesn't tell you, you know, what your mental state is going to be necessarily, or how much wiggle room you may or may not have to affect change, which is a big part of the astrological sort of philosophy that you have to wade through, is like how much free will and how much fate is in any person's life, and what degree are they restrictive or helpful or whatever. So tarot can be much more relative. It's much closer to you. One of the things that I felt that was really interesting is my friend brought up like, oh, you know, you can have a situation that you predict, like your Saturn return, right? You can be looking up your Saturn return when you're 16. And the delineations will always be the same in astrology for the most part, because they're going to be looking at the same data consistently. But the way that a 16-year-old feels about their Saturn return and the way that like a 29-year-old will feel about their Saturn return are going to be totally different. The goals that they have are going to be totally different. The friends, the people in their lives they have, the narratives they're telling themselves may be different. And so tarot can really speak to those changes and those nuances because it moves with you, right? Like every time you draw cards, you're going to get a different combination, most likely. Although it is very common for me, like when I'm confused and I'm kind of doubting if my spread is correct, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to redraw. Any cards that were relevant are going to show up again. And you know, not infrequently does that happen where you get like a couple cards that are the same and stuff. But the point is like it's much more adaptable and it attunes to your specific energy. And also another a benefit of tarot over astrology is you can ask multiple follow-up questions back to back to back. There's a technique in astrology called horary astrology where you can use it to ask a question, and you can't do it for yourself because it depends upon the moment that the astrologer receives the question from the questioner, and then you look up that chart to answer the question. So if you wanted to ask a question, you would go to a different horary astrologer. And the limitation there is, you know, you can't ask a follow-up question because it's going to have the same rising sign. It's going to have, you know, it might have a different 12th part or something like that. There might be little differences, but for the most part, it's going to be very similar. Versus tarot, you can go ham. You can ask it anything at any time. So anyway, so I do think that like tarot and astrology go really well because they can kind of fact check each other. And in astrology, you have so much data. There's so much infinitely forever. Like that you have no idea how much you can really get out of any given chart. Honestly, I'm still looking at my birth chart and I find new things about it all the time. Then you got transits on top of things. So it's like a whole thing. And so figuring out which pieces of that data are relevant to you personally in this moment as you're going through your life, that can be a little bit difficult. And tarot is like really good at picking that out. So that's why I use in my Patreon horoscopes, I use tarot and astrology. So I look at people's rising signs. I look at the transits that are happening and affecting those, you know, prominent signs in the houses. And then I draw cards to hone in and be like, what is important to this rising sign specifically? Like what specific things should I be looking for or around? So anyway, the point is they can really help kind of like they can help direct each other. You know, astrology makes it more objective, structured. And it's more of the fate. And I think tarot can make it a little bit more directed, more personal, and shows you where you have free will, right? Like, can you change this? What can you change to what degree? Like, what does it look like if we go? That's the other thing. Tarot is very visual. I mean, you have all of these pictures. So when you ask the tarot cards questions and you say things like, what does it look like for this to happen? And you get like, I don't know, the Two of Swords. You're like, oh, it looks like you're thinking. It looks like you're maybe not sure, right? And you can go upon the imagery. It looks like it's kind of a peaceful situation. Looks like there's not any need to maybe make a decision right this minute, but it's maybe a little bit, you know, kind of cold, kind of distant, kind of hard to figure out, right? So you can get the vibe a lot better, I think, with tarot a lot of the times. And because the Rider-Waite-Smith, or really any tarot deck based off of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is almost all of them these days, whether they know it or not, because the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and the Thoth deck are probably the two most popular ones, and both of them have Golden Dawn correspondences. But the point is, if you use that, then you already have like clues baked in, right? Because the 36 cards 2 through 10 correspond to the 36 decans of astrology. The major arcana corresponds to either a sign or a planet or an element. And then the aces are elements, and then, you know, so et cetera, et cetera. So when you get a card and you're not sure, you're like, what does this mean? One really beneficial thing you can do is turn to astrology, and you can be like, oh, well, for example, okay, this card is the Venus deck in Virgo is the Nine of Pentacles. So you can say, okay, look at the chart for this moment. Is there anything going through any of the decans of Virgo? Is Venus involved somehow? Do I have anything in the Venus decan of Virgo? Right? Because the tarot is in this way, it can be less specific, right? It's more of a clue. You can look at Venus, you can look at Virgo, you can look at the Venus ruled decan of Virgo, you can look at transits to those planets, natal things to those planets, and it usually doesn't take you very far to kind of get what it's pointing at. It's usually not very difficult to troubleshoot. But anyway, so let's talk about Carly and her housing situation. Hazia, my baby Callie snake likes your voice. Aw, she's been hiding since I fed her yesterday, but she popped up for you. Oh, that's so cute. Yeah, she can tell we're connected. I'm like one of those snake speakers, right? I've actually been really interested in getting a snake, but my husband was like, hard no, absolutely not. Maybe when my son is a bit older, he'll be into it and he'll be like, yeah, let's get a snake. We can conspire, plot against the father. It's a tale as old as time. Anyway, yes, so as you were talking about the Three of Cups, the first card I got is the Three of Cups. It's so cool. Oh, yes, thank you, Kuri. Yeah, it is cool when stuff like that happens. I mean, synchronicities are all over the place. Um, but yeah, for whatever reason, the Three of Cups has been on my mind lately. And it's probably because I am engaging so much more with community. I'm kind of a recluse by nature, but I have like an astrology book club, so that's been kind of fun. And I'm doing a fundamentals of astrology course with Austin Coppock, so that they have like a chat forum. So there's more of that. I'm trying to go to Pagan Pride in Eugene, Oregon this year, not this month, it's in August, but this year, like I did last year, because that was very fun. So we're definitely being forced to go outside of our comfort zone. So that's probably why it's on my mind. But anyways, so I really like the app Time Passages for both generating birth charts and looking at what the chart is right now. Yeah, totally. I think the app that I use is called Ephemeris. I like it because it's a one-time payment, which, I mean, don't get me started on, I don't, ironically, as someone who has a Patreon, which is a subscription service to different things, I have a lot of complicated feelings about subscription services, and particularly with apps and stuff, but I really like it if you can just buy like a one-time purchase thing. Maybe that's just showing my age though at this point. But yeah, so ephemeris you can buy at one time, and then they have like additional things you can purchase if you want, but it can show you the chart of the time or the chart of the hour. It can show you, you can like log, yeah, you can collect people's souls, you can collect charts and then have them displayed. And you can also do things like set specific, what's the word? House systems. You can have specific house systems or specific, you can show the bounds, you can show the decans, which is really important for me. I really like to work for the bounds and decans. They do give you the lot of fortune, but they don't give you any other of the hermetic lots. I have emailed them asking if they might consider putting them in, but maybe as like an additional purchase or something, because I would totally use them. I also wish they put the 12th part, which is when they divide each of the 12 zodiac signs into the 12 zodiac signs. So it sounds complicated, but it's just for like adding flavor. If you have a planet in like a very specific set of degrees, in, I don't know, in Aries, right? Then beyond the decans, which are planetary, and beyond the bounds, which are planetary, you can go to like the 12th part and you might have a planet that's in, I don't know. Let me think. Can I think of one off the top of my head? Okay, so like my lot of spirit is in the 5th house in Taurus, and it's in the 12th part also of, it's in the bound of Venus and the 12th part also of Taurus. So it's very much reinforcing this idea of like, yeah, art and material things. And I literally, you know, make material. I make art and turn it into a material product of a thing, right? And so the lot of spirit is like what you choose to do with your life, and that's what I'm doing with my life, is creating physical things of Venusian appeal. So it's kind of fun to have that extra layer versus like if you had something, for example, I don't know, if you had like your lot of fortune in Taurus, but it was in the 12th part of Gemini, maybe it would be a bit more intellectual or something, or a bit, maybe it would be like PDFs or something that's more technological, right? So the 12th part system just adds a little bit of flavor. It's literally the last, in my research so far, it's generally considered to be kind of the last thing you check. Like sometimes people who have to deal with twins, identical twins that are born, you know, obviously very, very close together. Sometimes you can have an identical set of twins who have different rising signs if it was like on the cusp or something. But for the most part, because they're so close together, they're going to have charts that look very, very similar, but the 12th part could be different. So people will look at that and they'll say, okay, so, you know, these are the small butterfly effect kind of differences that account for the twins living, you know, very different lives. Although there's, you know, a lot of anecdotal, in my experience, I don't have twins, but from things that I've heard about twins, it's not uncommon for twins, even twins who are removed at birth, to have very similar lives, or to have like similar wives, similar jobs and stuff like that. So not identical necessarily, but similar enough that it would still be covered in the breadth of what the astrological interpretations could be, which is exciting. Okay, so Carlisle, do you have a very specific question about your housing thing you want to ask? Or I know you're thinking about moving houses. You got a text from your landlord that they're gonna try to maybe sell the property, and maybe the new person they're selling the property to will keep the tenants, maybe not, maybe they'll raise rent, maybe they won't. But you also have friends who are thinking about moving, so you might move in with them, you might not. Do you have a specific question, or you just want to know general outcomes? Or while we wait for your reply, I'm gonna go ahead and just ask the tarot what is the situation for Carlisle as the tarot sees it? What do we got like as an overview? And then if you have a specific thing you want to add to that question, please do let me know in the comments. Okay. Oh, good. Look, we got several things to work with. Oh, the tower. Oh my God. This is what I'm talking about. Okay. And I think it's really good that I'm doing these lives so that I can document these things, because I always think, oh, I should write it down. It's too good. I need to write it down. But then I forget and I don't. Here's the thing. So the reason why in the very beginning, okay, so I know Carlisle, I know her chart, I know her situation, and we're looking at these different transits that are happening. Right now, Carlisle's having a Saturn return. Their natal Saturn is in Aries in the 12th house, okay, so if that's relevant. They have a natal Gemini second house, and natally their fourth house is Leo. So Mars is in Leo, their fourth house, and I'm looking at the end of let me just look at Sky now so I don't say anything that's like inappropriate. Yeah, okay. So currently Mars is in Leo, and which is their fourth house. And I knew that we were looking together at their chart at around, I don't know, when was this? Like the end of, what was last month again? April, May, June. Sometime around April or May, I think, we were looking at all these different transits, and I was noticing, hey, Mars in the fourth house ends up sextiling Jupiter and Gemini, Jupiter and Mercury and the Sun in the second house, which also ends up making a trine to Venus and Saturn in her 12th house, but so those are the transiting planets, and then because she natally has Saturn in the 12th house, it's like a Saturn return. And so we were able to basically kind of workshop this, and I was really certain. I was like, okay, Mars in the fourth house means by the way, the tower is associated with Mars, so that's why this is super relevant. The first thing I noticed, I was like, Mars is going to kick off or initiate some kind of event that makes your fourth house, your home, your dwelling, your living situation very uncomfortable and prompts you to want to leave or move or change it in some way. And Carlisle loves her apartment, so she was like, no, it can't be that. I'm not moving. There's no way I'm moving. And I'm like, I really think you might at least consider moving this, by the time this transit is done with you, because when modern astrologers say that Mars is like motivation and drive, it is, but it's motivation like the way that the spur makes the horse move, or like the whip gets the slave to work harder. Like Mars is not a pleasant kind of motivator, right? Like he rejoices in the sixth house, which is traditionally the house of slavery. That's why I bring up the whole slave thing. He rejoices in torture and being tortured. Like that's the archetype of Mars. He's aggressive, he's violent, he's bloodthirsty, and he does have his virtues, because everything does, right? He's courageous, he's bold, he's brave. In several ancient sources, Mars is the torturer, but he is also the liberator of torturer, right? Like he's the person who or the people, the movement, the energy that then overthrows those tyrannical kind of, because you have to risk your body, right? To do that, you have to risk life and limb. That's the kind of thing that Mars is. Very aggressive, very strong, but not pleasant. That's why he's a malefic. So now Mars can do a lot of things and can be a lot of things, and a Mars in a natal chart is a bit different than a Mars in a transit. And this is really important to know, because it's something that I did not understand when I was first learning astrology. So when you have Mars, everybody has a Mars and a Saturn, right? Everyone's got malefics in their chart, and they're very complicated, and they're interacting with a lot of different things that will unfold in many different ways throughout your life. When you have a natal Mars, no matter how bad or good it is, you have an entire lifetime to figure out how to work with it, what triggers it, what comes out, what comes of it. But when it's a transit, even though Mars is not like the fastest moving planet, it's still a relatively short amount of time. So it's less like we're figuring out how to internalize and psychologically evaluate and make the most of an archetypal energy within the psyche, and more like, hey, something's happening, and it embodies the archetype of Mars, which is, the tower. fire. So it's motivating like, hey, yeah, run away from the crumbling on fire tower. Um, that's the kind of energy. And when you were dealing with a transit, in this case, I noticed, okay, so Mars is only making positive, what we call soft aspects to all the other planets. So, Mars is sextiling Jupiter, Mercury, and the Sun, in which this transit ends up being natally in Carlisle's second house of finances and wealth. So this means something about Mars motivating moving is like sympathetic to her finances, which means will ultimately help. But Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini. So it's like, okay, it helps, but it's not like getting paid. It's like saving money. Like I literally said that, right? Jupiter cannot really give his full blessings of abundance in Gemini because he's detriment there. But what he can maybe do is stop you from like spending needless money, right? Like save more saving money than making money, right? In other words. And Mercury is very like intellectual, logical, like you're going to think of a way to save more money because of being prompted by Mars, who's unhappy in the fourth house. And then it's also making this trine to Venus right now. And Saturn right now, but also natally her Saturn, which rules like a shit ton of stuff in her chart because she has a ninth house stellium in Capricorn, and then Jupiter's in Aquarius where it's also being ruled by Saturn, and then Sagittarius and the Sun are in the eighth, but they're still being ruled by Jupiter, which is being ruled by Saturn. So everything in her chart goes back to Saturn. And I was like, so it's interesting because the 12th house is one of those things where it's everything that is hidden. Like the sixth house is considered domestic animals. The 12th house would be wild feral animals, right? The sixth house is like physical illnesses you can see. The 12th house is like mental illnesses you cannot see, the intangible, being haunted. It's also alone, being isolated. It's, anxiety, mental illness. It's the subconscious. It's also the house of enemies, hidden enemies, right? Usually your enemies are plotting against you. This is the traditional thought. This is the 12th house is when you don't see them, right? You don't see what they're doing. You might have a vague subconscious intuitive sense, but you don't see it visually. Which is also why sometimes the seventh house is the house of open enemies, although in my experience, it very rarely manifests as that. But the idea is that the seventh house is like, oh, we have agreed upon contractual relationships and we know what they are. So good or bad, that's kind of where those sort of very intense personal relationships go when everyone's on the same page and mutual about it. And usually in modern contexts, that ends up being like a lover, partner. It's the house of marriage, so it makes sense. But the 12th house is where you'd find hidden enemies, people talking about you behind your back or plotting or scheming or whatever. It is also been in modern context associated with the subconscious, and all of the more positive, like in ancient texts, it does say to be imprisoned or join a nunnery, right? Or monastery. And it's important to note that like whether it's by your own volition or you're being physically forced, it is about being removed and isolated. And during those times, we tend to explore the spiritual realms a bit more. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting a little bit on a tangent, but it's just important to understand like how cool this is because the point is, so Carlisle, I hope you don't mind me oversharing a little bit, but has been dealing with like, she's been living alone in the 12th house for a while, right? And has been kind of struggling with this idea of like, if I were to live with somebody else, would they, get along with me? Would they like me? Like these were pressing matters. And, how would that work? How would that, so there were a lot of like subconscious hidden kind of like struggles or issues with that. And so I was like, this Mars transit is going to do something that affects the second house and the 12th house in sympathetic ways, but it's Mars. So like, it's still going to kind of hurt. It's going to be burning or itching or irritating. So literally like then, but she's like, oh, no, I love my apartment. Everything's fine. Like, no, that's not going to happen. My friends are looking for new housing. Is that possible? Is it referring to them? And I was like, no, not unless they come and live with you and you hate it. You know what I mean? Like it's not, and they have to be entering your house for it to be that. So I predicted you might move. And then also because, this Mars would have been trining that Sagittarius sun in the 8th, and that can be about inheritances and property. And I happen to know, like, so anyway, so I was like, you might have to like ask for a loan or maybe ask your parents for money for like a down payment or something, because that would be sending rays into your natal chart. That's like, hey, Mars is activating this in some way. Anyway, long story short though, we're like, yeah, I don't know, I don't think it's gonna be that. I'm like, I think it's gonna be that. And then lo and behold, you know, she gets a text message from her landlord and is like, hey, I'm gonna sell the complex you're living in. So it's totally fits like out of nowhere, not of your own volition, totally Mars in the fourth house, triggering all these events. But then immediately, because, and this is important to note too, because in her chart they were sharing sympathetic relationships with each other, sextiles or trines, she immediately was able to find a house that, with, if she were to live with her roommate, or if she were to get roommates with her friends that were already looking for housing anyway, would be $700 a month cheaper than what she's paying right now for a way worse apartment, objectively speaking. So it literally is like, yes, it's uncomfortable because you like your apartment, but it's triggering you to get something better, to somehow be advantageous. So when malefics work in our chart for us, it still creates uncomfortable situations. Like no one wants a text message from their landlord out of the blue that they're not going to have, you know, potentially a home or something. But because it was working in tandem with the benefics, even though both benefics are in detriment right now because Venus is in Aries and Jupiter is in Gemini, it still can create a harmony that is ultimately conducive for the life, right? Because that's the important part of like aspects. Malefics are malefics, benefics are benefics, the neutrals are neutral. The way that they interact creates a very specific alchemy. So yeah, so malefics can work for you, but it won't feel good. You know what I mean? Or at least it very rarely does. Or if it feels good, it's like in hindsight, you know, good to be over, good to be done with. So I'm going to pull some more cards. I'm going to catch up with the comments really quick in case I miss question. I know I kind of go on these rants, but let's see. Oh man, you guys are chatting so much. That's so awesome. I'm so happy. That's so funny. I actually like the tower. Yeah, that tower. That's so funny. And also, that's so okay. So I'm a night chart, or sorry, I'm a day chart. Mars is my out of sect malefic, and I have wondered if people's relationship to the archetypes of Mars or Saturn, the malefics, are different based on night or day. Like for me, I'm way less afraid of Saturn. Saturn rules things like restrictions, limitations, isolation, whatever. You know, he's definitely like more cold and removed and like heavy burdens and toilsome labor and all these things versus Mars, which is more like aggressive and like acute. And I'm way more comfortable with Saturn and his delineations than Mars, typically speaking. And I wondered if that's because, first of all, in addition to being ruled by Saturn, I also am a day chart. So he tends to be less malefic when he shows up for me, versus if you are a night chart, which is to say born at night, then Mars is your insect malefic. He's the malefic of the night sect, and because of that, he's more on your team. So he tends to be less damaging than Saturn would be. So those were kind of interesting notes because even the malefics, like there's so much variation and individual. Like you really have to know all this stuff. So I'm pretty sure I'll be moving at this point. There's so much I want to know. Will things work out with Vic and Hannah, the dog situation? Okay, so we'll definitely pull some cards for those specifically. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we got this. Okay, I'm just making sure there are not any more questions or anything. Mars is opposite Pluto too, so there's really that shape of fear in the home space. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, that was a rough text message, wasn't it? Okay, so it's looking like we're not missing too much. Just you guys being so friendly. Oh, hi, Jojo. I'm so happy you're here. Good to have you. Okay, all right. So this is the tarot. So we're asking about Carlisle's housing situation. This is as the tarot sees it. We get the tower because yes, something big out of the blue shook you up and changed your life events. This makes a lot of sense. I was literally talking to you about the tower. I was like, well, about Mars. Now I'm like interchanging the tarot titles and the astrological associations. I'm like using them interchangeably. But yeah, I was like, I'm almost positive that Mars is gonna kick off this whole shebang, and like really like your Saturn return is gonna start with some Mars activity. So we have that. Oh, look at this. We also have the 10 of Wands because, you know, we're looking at literally, you just said, Carlisle, in the chat, the end of an era, right? And here we have the end of the Suit of Wands. So that's pretty fun. This is the end of your living alone. You're safe and protected in the 12th house, but you have to merge out and be with other people, and you're dealing with a lot of burdens, right? The burden of success. Like, great, okay, so you found a situation where, oh shit, I might not have a house. Oh great, I have a situation where I can solve that problem. And now, because we're like at the end of this turning point, there's all of these new questions and these new issues that come around, and but oh, by the way, this is also relevant. Sorry, I just got lately I've been starting, I don't know if this, maybe I'm just I don't know, like personifying the inner workings of my own psyche, but sometimes I feel like something's yelling at me. Anyway, I just forgot to mention, this is actually the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius. Carlisle's sun is a Sagittarius, and she's having her Saturn return, and her Saturn is in Aries in the 12th house, which was part of this whole shebang. So you see what I mean when I say, like, the decans are helpful in that literally it could be something happening in the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius, which maybe just to make sure, I'm going to see what decan Carlisle's sun is in, because that would be really funny. But I'm expecting it more to just be pointing into like, hey, Saturn, fire sign, you're dealing with this thing. Like, it's a heavy burden. It's a heavy burden that you really have, like, are very motivated to keep carrying, and that you have to kind of make that decision. But because I happen to have Carlisle's chart, I will look it up and we'll see. I'll see how specific it might be trying to be, but I really suspect it's just to say, hey, bring up Saturn, like this is a Saturn thing. But let me check. Okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, so Carlisle has Pluto in the Mercury decan of Sagittarius, and Carlisle has Saturn in the Moon decan of Sagittarius. So not the Saturn decan, but that's still nevertheless really neat. I wonder. Oh, the other thing too that this could be indicating is because Mars is in Leo, it will be trining these different points in the chart. It's possible, and sorry, I would not normally go this in depth with a thing, but because, for the sake of science, I'm going to go look and show the chart with the chart right now, and we're going to see where Mars is, because it's possible. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Mars is at 23 degrees in Leo, which means, if I'm not very much mistaken, let me count. Sorry, quick math. Oh, yes. Yes, wow, it is. Mars right now is trining within the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius. So I wonder, and you just recently got that text from your landlord too. So I wonder if the actual triggering event is Mars transiting Mars in the 4th house, sending the trine ray into the Saturn ruled decan of Sagittarius, where your natal sun and Pluto are. So big, like, anyway, so that's pretty cool. Okay, hold on. We got a question about fighting. You've captured my attention. Da, 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 da. Are those peonies? This is masterwort, which I had never seen in person. I have several books about like the different plant meanings and symbolisms and stuff. Actually, let me just go show you one, because there's one that I particularly like. I'm actually going to show you two. So one of them that I really like is Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs by Scott Cunningham. I really like this a lot. It shows the magical properties of herbs. The other one is Flowerpedia, which is more of like a showing the cultural symbolism behind different plants. But this one is really nice because it's so easy to use. So you can just like look up, we'll just use Masterwort as an example since we're here. You can just, look at M. Then it looks for all these different things. And then we go to Masterwort, which I do believe is in here. Yeah, Masterwort. Courage and strength. See, so that's what it means. Courage and strength. It's also used, I think Scott Cunningham mentions it too in this book. It's been a while since I've done the active research for Ostara, so I don't remember straight out, but I'm pretty sure he does. Yeah, I'm actually, because I did try to use, that was another consideration for why some plants made it into the Ostara deck over others. I wanted there to be like resources outside of the deck you could turn to for further clarification. So I did try to stick with plants that were in my source material so that people could like look it up afterwards if they wanted. Yeah, Masterwort. Here, oh yeah, here we go. Masterwort. So strength, courage, protection. Masterwort grants physical strength if worn, and so may be used by laborers and athletes to reinforce the body. It is also carried to aid the will and calm emotions, and is an amulet against evil. Sprinkle it about to make spirits appear. So that's what he says about Masterwort. So the reason that I put it in the Ten of Wands is because, the Ten of Wands is about heavy labors and burdens. It's like reaching the end of a really hard, long journey only to discover, hey, this opens the door for the sequel, which is a whole nother, resets the cycle, another long, hard journey. I think one of the things about Wands that's interesting is it's really got this beautiful narrative arc about, having the spark and then getting the flame and then starting the hearth and then making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then before you know it, it's like, oh shit. It's really fun and inspiring and necessary to have this force of will and to start that spark and to start that journey. But maintaining a fire gets harder and harder and harder the bigger it is, right? And it consumes more and more and more and more. And so it seems like the end journey of fire is to fizzle out or consume everything around it. The only thing outside of that is to have constant control over it, right? Which requires vigilance and energy, and it's a labor, right? This is why keeping a hearth was such an important thing for like medieval cultures and things like that. Like it takes a lot of energy to keep a fire at exactly the right level where it's not too hot and it's also not going to burn out, right? Not going to consume and devour, but also not going to go out and leave you freezing. So maintaining that is difficult. It's a Saturnian kind of a thing, right? So that's pretty fun. But yes, so that's Masterwort. I just got 3 boxes. It took a while, which I was fine with. Yeah, Alicia's awesome. She got so many of those of the Ostara rewards. It was great. I kept having to be like, and we keep getting the boxes in these really awkward kind of, I shouldn't say awkward, but he can only make them. We have a craftsperson in the UK working on them, and he makes them each one to order. So it takes however long it takes. But then we also get these situations where he'll send us the smaller 1-deck apothecary boxes, and then he'll send us like a bunch of bigger boxes. But we don't usually have both at the same time. So because Alicia ordered like some big and some small, I was like, shit, we have to save both. But we got there. Last time I like specifically held one of the smaller boxes, or however many of the smaller boxes aside, and then when we got the big boxes, I was like, okay, she's next. Like, I'm like not good at logistical coordination, honestly, but we're getting there slowly but surely. Everyone is being taken care of. So, ooh, neat. So, yes. Oh, you have a doctor's appointment? Oh no, we better hurry this up then. Okay, and then we have the King of Cups, right? Because we have the ability to problem solve, deal with people. There's also like somebody who has some kind of emotional authority or experience who can potentially help you and stuff. And okay, so you want to know how the situation, let's pull some cards real quick since you have to go. So how the situation goes with Hannah and Vic. We'll pull a couple cards for how the situation goes. Oh, we got some stuff with Hannah and Vic. Okay. I'm just going to take the stack since the stack fell out. We'll do speed read. Okay. So difficulty with financial support and difficulty with maintaining it's kind of like wanting to go, okay, how do I say this? One person, since we're dealing with, let me rephrase. We know we're dealing with Hannah and Vic. I'm going to take an educated guess and just say this is Vic and this is Hannah. We literally have like a male and a female card, so that seems like it hits. And also, I happen to know you've told me that Vic is worried about his financial prospects and if he's going to be able to keep his job. And Hannah is impulsively trying to get a dog before she even has a place to stay. So contextually, it seems like the reverse King of Coins might be somebody who's really worried about his financial autonomy and his ability to remain financially in control and like do the thing that he wants to do. And then we have the Knight of Wands reversed, so somebody who's impulsive and trying to solve a bunch of problems, going every which way and just kind of doing whatever they want because they want to. Usually when the Knights are reversed, it's like, oh, somebody's gone rogue, right? Like they have a mission, they have a goal, but they're getting distracted by the side quest, or they're not following directions, or they're actively going against themselves. And getting a dog before you have a place to stay and are worried about your housing situation does kind of put it in the Knight of Wands reverse category, because I'm sure it will work out, honestly. I think it'll be fine. One of my friends did almost the exact same thing and was okay, but it is, it's impulsive and it is a huge side quest, right? Like the priority should be securing your housing and then getting pets, but people are what they are, so they don't always do that. But then we've got this Six of Swords because we're going to solve the problem. This is related to the the Mercury ruled decan of the sign Aquarius. This is about, it's sometimes called the Lord of Science in the Hermetic titles. And science is literally problem solving, right? Data collection and problem solving. We're figuring out how to get past these obstacles, find the key to what will actually make this work. And then we have the swords, the Queen of Swords upright. So somebody gives good advice. Somebody has good judgment. And that person is going to be instrumental in finding out how to actually get past these obstacles as they present. We also have the moon upright because yes, anxiety, that's difficult. Potentially there are problems, there's unknowns, there are things that are hidden. And then we have the Eight of Wands, of course, because it's going super fast. You literally just got the text message from your landlord that you would be forced to move. Like, when did you tell me you got that? I don't know, a couple days ago? Yesterday, the day before. So yeah, things are moving really quickly in the course of like 2 or 3 days, right? You found out you might not have a house, you might not want your the current apartment that you have, you can find something better, you might move in with your friends, they might get a dog, you're already negotiating terms, like things are moving very quickly. But we have the Lovers upright. So alignment is made, unity is made, we're figuring out how to see eye to eye and how to kind of combine or merge. So earlier, and this is also funny because I literally started the live and the Lovers reversed fell out, but the Lovers upright is here. So, spirit, tarot, God, gods, whatever, somebody turned the card over specifically for you. So that's nice because it really does show like harmony and union and like coming together, sharing information, figuring things out, like more logical heads prevailing, having alignment with our inner and external worlds. So it definitely seems like what's happening right now is very intentional, I suppose, for lack of better words. Like it has to happen and it's gonna, things are gonna kind of fall into place. But this definitely also seems to follow a narrative order, right? It seems like we got all these cards that were like very indicative of how it already seems to be unfolding. Starting out primarily with like, how is the situation with Hannah and Vic? And it's like, well, one is worried about their finances and one is impulsively making decisions because it helps them to feel better in the moment. And then, and how do we deal with that problem? And it's like, well, somebody's going to give sound advice that helps us solve this problem. This is like, honestly, like the tarot version of a trine, right? Because these are both air cards. And this is literally so informed. This is like some person that you're interacting with good judgment, who's like, got a head on her shoulders and is looking at the situation with discernment for what it is. Some person is going to come up with solutions to these problems and help to solve them, right? So this seems very much pair hand in hand. And then it's like, yes, you're very anxious because things are moving very quickly. That's a tough spot to be in. So, but I think that having the Lovers upright is like, yeah, it works out. And this all plays into the theme of your Saturn return, learning how to be loved and seen by other people when you are forced to be in close proximity with them, which is a theoretical until it isn't, right? Like you never know what the dynamic is going to be until you're in that dynamic. That was, part of the write-up about the Lovers card that I just released on Patreon too, for the Onyx Tarot. I was talking about how the Lovers often represents the situation where, you have person A and person B come together to make an entirely third thing that is neither A nor B, right? This is like the idea of, sometimes that thing is a child, sometimes it's just a dynamic, it's just a mood. Like you can perfectly love Hannah and Vic as they are, as your friends, but the dynamic of what they're going to be like as people that you live with, who see you every day, good and bad, that's going to potentially be a totally third entity, like a different thing, a different vibe. But, they are your friends. So at a base level, it's like, on the one hand, sometimes moving in with your friends makes you like your friends less. On the other hand, as roommates, if you already like them as base people, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're always going to have problems with the people you live with. This is true if you're married, if you're moving in with boyfriends or girlfriends, if you're just living with friends for rent situations, whatever it is, you're living with your parents, as they say, familiarity breeds contempt. And at some point, because, Gemini is mutable, people come together, they turn apart. When you see yourself reflected in the other, not all of the things you see are good and prompt your best behaviors. And that's true of everybody. But that's not also how it stays. Gemini is mutable. It changes. It's light and then dark. It's good and then bad. It's up and then down, right? It's yes and then no. So having, knowing and keeping the focus on like the lovers upright and the idea that, well, you already know you like these people. So, that's the best odds you can go into something with from the start, right? Maybe it'll get worse. Maybe it'll be even better, but you're definitely at better odds than moving in with people you either don't know or actively dislike. So it really is the best situation you could hope for, as far as that goes. And the thing about Saturn and Aries in the 12th that you just have natally, it's always going to be kind of, I don't know, a tricky topic. Isolation versus cohabitation. It's always going to draw up these kinds of like hidden insecurities and self-sabotage, self-undoing, right? Because literally that's what the 12th house is all about. Oh, and I was about to say something earlier too. So there are like references to removing yourself forcibly or, by your own volition to like nunneries, because those are places of contemplation, reflection, they are spiritual in nature. You abstain from other people. Sometimes you take vows of silence. Those are all very 12th housey things. It got really, the 12th house idea got way more spiritualized with the advent of modern astrology, which used the ABC method to pin Pisces as being associated with the 12th house, which before it was not necessarily. It's, whatever your rising sign is, the sign, is going to be the 12th house dependent on that. So if you're Capricorn rising, your 12th house is going to be Sagittarius. It's not going to be Pisces, right? If you're Taurus rising, it's going to be Aries. It's not going to be Pisces. So anyway, so I don't really like the ABC method because I feel like, there are certain overlaps, because that shows the mandala of astrology, right? Like, yes, Aries and the first house have overlaps. When Aries is your first house, that makes a lot of intuitive sense and that's great. But when it's not, the alchemy of astrology is what comes from the fact that the first house has these qualifications, these topics of life, and whatever planet is in it has this other kind of thing that gets blended in, and then whatever sign it's in, that has this third kind of layer, and so you get these really intricate kind of blending of things. But it doesn't make sense to say like, oh, Capricorn is the 10th house, or Pisces is the 12th house, because somebody's going to have a totally different chart, which means the different planets that transit through those signs, through those houses, having something be really like, I think it's harder to actually make like use of that information. But I do think there is some precedence for the 12th house as having a sort of spiritual kind of connotation, because it's about isolation. And usually when people have spiritual sort of, I don't know, phenomenon, whether they're haunted or they see a vision or they see an angel or they talk to God, usually it's because they're alone, they're in their own head, they're meditating, they're in a quiet church, they are removed from their daily life, they're removed from the humdrum of everything that's going on around them. And in those moments of isolation, we're really forced to reflect on ourselves, our relationship with the other, with God, with spirit. And I think that can be good or bad depending on where you're at, right? So sometimes the 12th house is called the house of ruin or self-undoing. And I like to think of it as like, well, you can undo it as in you can ruin yourself, right? Self-sabotage, and you can undo all your plans. But I also think like we all have in us these subconscious kind of knots that cause problems. And if we very methodically, quietly, with a removed kind of like patience, patience that Saturn might rejoice in, for example, because Saturn rejoices in the 12th house, we can kind of pick at these threads and unravel them and figure out what they're actually trying to tell us, right? Sometimes we call this shadow work. Sometimes we call this, just self-reflection, meditation. You can do it intentionally and it can yield better results than when you're kind of forced to do it because you're, I don't know, in prison or going mentally, unstable or something like that. So the 12th house does have some breadth. And if you had benefics there, you might, or if Pisces really was your 12th house and Jupiter was in it, then you might have this more uplifting kind of spiritual sort of relationship with your subconscious demons and your subconscious sort of psyche. But overall, for most people, it's not necessarily the case. It really depends. It really just depends. Having benefics there can help. Having benefics there usually makes it so there's some kind of good that comes out of it. Because the dark houses typically do have subject matters that are difficult for natives to deal with. That's why they're dark. They're like unseen by the ascendant. Anyway, so we have some of those questions. Like Hannah supposedly needs to be moved out by July 1st. Oh, damn. We should look at the chart for that, but I don't want to get too lost in it, but it's easier to give people grace if you're already attached somewhat. Yeah, totally, exactly. Like we make excuses for the people we love, right? And for ourselves, and we tend not to do that for complete strangers. So Alicia says, speaking as an attorney, but giving strictly friendly advice, I think it's a good thing that you're already working on how to negotiate potential issues and conflicts. Yeah, totally. I think getting ahead of the game as much as you can will help you. But it sounds like, at least based on what the tarot is saying, like, consensus will be reached, right? We'll have some kind of union or understanding. So you're just working through that and you've just got this process. And it is good to consider the things that could go wrong. I think that's definitely true. So that is Carlisle's reading for your housing situation. July 1st will at least have Venus and Taurus. Oh yeah, true. Yeah. So it's great for you and for being your own agency. Yeah, totally. And it's, because she's Taurus ruled, like you said, Taurus in the first house, Venus is her chart ruler. So having the chart ruler in her domicile in the first, like that's all really good. It's more relevant for Carlisle as a Taurus rising that Venus is going into Taurus than it would otherwise be for, other people. But nevertheless, Venus in Taurus is a very powerful Venus. So wherever she ends up in your chart, she's probably going to be better disposed to do the things that she likes to do, which are bring about things like love, harmony, relationships that are good and fulfilling and, beautiful, pleasure, sex, all the things that Venus rules, right? She wants to do those things by nature. So when she's in Taurus, she's very well situated. She has a lot of ability to do those things. She's powerful. She has her own agency. So it speaks well for us here stuck on Earth that the goddess of pleasure is going to be a lot better at bringing pleasure. You know what I mean? So that was amazing. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's always so funny how these things play out. Venus will also be approaching Uranus, so take it with a grain of surprising salt. True. Yeah, it'll go well, but not the way you think, right? It's always that quick. And I mean, she's already dealing with such sudden upheavals and stuff. It's pretty funny. So does anybody else have any specific questions you want to ask? I can probably have time for about one more. And we don't have to use the Children of Ostara also. You can pick, we can pick the Children of Ostara, Litha, or the Nameless one. So if you guys have any... Otherwise, I can also just pull cards, or it doesn't have to be a tarot-related question either. If you have questions about upcoming deck projects or deadlines, questions about specific cards, like just how to read them or how they work, or tarot-related questions, like we can talk about the mechanics of tarot reading, or we could talk about, specific questions for the tarot. So whatever anyone wants to bring up is fine. And if you want to switch decks, that's also fine. Can I ask how year 2 will be, if it's fine? Yeah, sure. Let's ask how year 2 will be. I'm assuming you mean year 2 of the astrology course, but correct me if I'm wrong. And also, do you want to switch decks with anything? Because I don't know. I just picked Ostara because it was the one I was working with, but yeah, for astrology. Okie dokie. Do you want to switch decks, or should I keep using the Children of Ostara? Oh, okay, cool. So we'll just go with that then. Oh man, I hope the tarot doesn't pick out. This is the thing though. If you're going to ask me about year 2 of astrology, and I still have not taken my exams for it, so I'm still like freaking out about it. So I hope it doesn't like draw too much on my own, like, Shall we ask in general? I guess we'll ask how year 2 will go in general, although I don't know if I'm involved in it, that might be... Well, let's just see what happens. You might as well see. We can always figure it out after. Okay, how will year 2 of Fundamentals of Astrology go? And then not exactly tarot related, but can you recommend a good paper planner calendar for all the astrological happenings? I really can't, unfortunately. I have Ephemeris as an app, and I just kind of look, and you can move the chart forward, and so I just look at all of the transits. But if it would be helpful to you, I can start making a list of all the transits that are going to happen in the month and just posting them on Patreon, because, and then you can put them in whatever calendar you want. I do that anyway when I write the horoscopes. I have a thing that I keep track of. So I write all of the transits and what it's going to do and stuff. So I can just make Oh yeah, honeycomb. Oh, that's a great one. I totally forgot about them. Yes, I did have a honeycomb forever ago. They are good. Okay, yes. Yeah, totally. Honeycomb Collective, you can order transits based on your own chart even. Like they'll give you like your specific transits, which is really cool. I remember that way back. Oh my God. Thank you for reminding me that that existed because way back when I first started getting into astrology and really had no business looking at transits, I got one of those to try to figure it out. It was pretty cool. So yes, Honeycomb Collective is good. And you even get to choose like the artwork that they have these maybe I can find it. Okay, hold on really quick. I think I might have it in my office. And I can show you an example if I remember what I did with it. Um, oh man, they were just sitting around forever for the longest time. What did I do with it? Okay, well, I don't think I can find it quickly enough, but um anyway, yeah, Honeycomb Collective is a great recommendation. Thank you. That's awesome. I totally forgot they existed. That's so funny. I should get another one. But yeah, I'll still make a list of like the basic mundane transits and put them on Patreon because I think that might be helpful to people and it's easy to do. Okay, so let's see. Before I got distracted, no exam anxiety allowed. I like exams. I hate testing. I know everybody says, several people have said that when I tell them that I'm anxious about this, that they're like, oh, I love exams. I just don't relate. I just don't. I hate it. I always overthink it. And part of the problem is I feel like my brain is really predisposed to think of all of the ways in which something actually isn't straightforward. So people will ask a question and I'll be like, well, it's, could be this unless you're talking about this. And then it could be the other thing, or if you're talking about that, like, you know what I mean? So I always really overthink the thing. But then at the same time, I'll overlook very basic details, like very basic things. And so I'm not a good test taker at all. I never have been. And I also have a lot of personal trauma based around test taking. So I really just am not good at it. And it makes me feel so dumb, which makes me not want to do it. But that's anyway. So Crystal, I did get the 10 of Cups, which is good. I mean, this is that I haven't drawn cards. I was just shuffling, but we were thinking about that question and the 10 of Cups is at the bottom of the deck. So sometimes oh, that's another thing too. First of all, let me get my deck in order because something is well, I don't know. Should we count these? I will redo the reading because I got distracted like mid-reading, which is not typically what you want when you're doing a tarot reading. But for let's just say, okay, this is, diligent labor, doing the material work. This is like enlightenment, figuring things out. Also associated with Neptune, which could be relevant, could not be. I don't know, depends. And then this is the 10 of Cups. This is associated with the Mars ruled decan of Pisces, but it's also like fighting for that dream, that like perfect ideal fairy tale ending. And so this is like doing the slow mundane labor to get to that thing. But also I know that year 2 of astrology does have a lot more to do. I think like you start getting more into the more magical aspects of astrology, like trying to, actually predict things, for example. I mean, that's what I hear. So I think it makes sense for the Hanged Man, but also like subverting expectations and things becoming clear. When the Hanged Man is, that's one of those cards that's tricky for people because when it's upright, it's actually kind of more reversed. It's like, a martyr and being a martyr as in like, not like in the good way, like, like, oh, woe is me, I go through so much and I do all these things and who cares, that kind of like being a martyr, being really mired by your own personal ego perspective, not being able to kind of reach outside of that, being stuck on a rigid perspective. Like when it's like this, he's like, oh shit, I'm being sacrificed, I'm being tied to a tree, like it really sucks, I'm being punished, why is this happening to me, why does God hate me, why does God abandon me, like that kind of feeling. And then when it's reversed, it's actually kind of upright. So it's sort of like, oh, I'm ascending. I see the light. I understand why I've been put on this path and what I need to do. And this punishment is actually a blessing. And like, it's more of the, and by the way, this was only later associated with Neptune, obviously. In the original Rider-Waite schema, they didn't have Neptune yet. It wasn't discovered. So it was originally associated with just the water triplicity in general, which is the water elements. So I think that's interesting. And then later, after Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, some of the cards which were prescribed other things, they got kind of overlaid onto them, which I'm normally pretty skeptical about. But tarot is such like a living, breathing, like I don't know, deck to deck kind of a thing. And Neptune, I think, does actually fit the Hanged Man better than just general water does. So I do use Neptune as the significator for the Hanged Man. But anyway, so this is reversed though, or no, sorry, it was reversed, which means it's got the better kind of, because the I'm like tripping over myself. When the Hanged Man is reversed, the figure is upright, right? So that's the takeaway, right? It's like things being revealed, doing the slow diligence, day-to-day labor you need to do to get to that really great happy ever after ending. And the Mars ruled decan of Pisces is fun. I always associate it with boiling water. Like Pisces is this great big ocean or this dreamlike landscape, and it's got, every kind of good possible thing, all this anxiety and pleasure and illusion and all of the things and all of the wisdom that can be kind of gained through osmosis in that sign. And then the Mars ruled decan is like, you're turning up the heat, you're boiling the water. It's like, okay, something is happening, right? Like we're evolving life, or we're bursting forth from the womb of the cosmos, or we're asserting individuality out of the oneness of all spirituality, right? So, because Aries comes after. So it's like this idea of this is the last stage, right? And it's the 10 of Cups. It's the last cup in the water journey. So this is like the last stage before things happen. And like, sure enough, exams are closing soon, and then year 2 will begin. So it's like, you do your labor, you kind of get worked up, and then you go into this new thing. I don't know. I have this horrible inkling that it's not going to go well for me, but let's redo the tarot spread for how fundamentals of astrology will go, because like I said, I did get distracted and I wasn't. So I'll do an example of like, if it was relevant, we'll get some of those cards again, and if not, we'll get a new take on it. So let's do some of that. There's also sacrificial peace in the 10 of Cups. Yeah, totally. Oh, totally. Yes. And let's think about that for a minute, because that's a great point, because we also got the Hanged Man, who literally, I already shuffled him. Look, even the tarot is congratulating you. The 6 of Wands is like, yes, you got it. Good job. But no, so that's actually super relevant, because Mars is literally the spear, Pisces is sacrificial. It's very much like in the Hanged Man. I have to find that card now, because that was such a beautiful point. Thank you for bringing that up. That was so good. I wish I had thought of it, but that's why you're here. Okay, so where is that card? Because Pisces is this beautiful, perfect dream in the 10 of Cups, and then Mars is like the spear of sacrifice that makes it happen, right? It's like, what are you willing to give up and die for to make this dream a reality? And it's so fun, because it's like, that's when we're moving from, literally, okay, let me just show you, because this is the first decan of Aries. This is the 2 of Wands. And then let me pull up the 10 of Cups again. Sorry, now we're starting to talk about like a academic tarot lecture, but I think it's worth noting, because it's a really good point. And I really do feel like a lot of people I feel like you could benefit by incorporating generally this into the tarot aspect, right? Because, sorry, what am I trying to say? I feel like the 10 of Cups is one card in particular where having the backbone of astrology really benefits the tarot meaning in a big way. So the 10 of Cups, if you just take the common tarot association that you might find in, like, I don't know, like on Instagram or something, or like a brief, like an overview beginner's book or something, they might tell you domestic bliss, happy ever after. It's the perfect card. It's like marriage. It's awesome. It's beautiful. Perfect rose bed, a perfect rainbow. Everything's happening. It's wonderful. When you look at more slightly advanced books, they say things like, it's almost too perfect. It's almost like this is a stage of fantasy, something that is something that's inspiring but not real. There's something kind of illusionary about it. It's like too perfect, right? And if you overlap the astrology onto it, you say yes, because this is the last decan of Pisces. Everything has already been dissolved into the cosmic web of oneness, right? Everything is everything. Every possible is here. It is literally like in a dream where everything just appears before you. But we're about to go into the first decan of Aries, where we have to like grab the axe, chop the trees, do the work, assert our dominance over the world, the material world, and say like, this is me, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to fucking do, right? Because then we go into the Mars ruled decan of Aries. So it comes out from this like, what do we sacrifice to make our dreams a reality, right? So Mars is really important in the Mars ruled sign of Pisces, in the Mars ruled decan of Pisces, because it's literally like, okay, this is great. I love all this ambient water shit you got going on. Like, this is so fun and beautiful. And yeah, it's great, Jupiter, good job. But now we're going to make something of it, which means something has to die. You know, that the shell has to be broken. The womb has to be like, you know, it has to be, I don't know what to say, like, what's the opposite of penetrated, like burst forth from, right? It has to be erupted. The status quo has to be completely, like, you know, blown up, right? Where it's literally like how people visualize birth like the 10 of cups, like, oh, my beautiful baby, my perfect dream, look at me rubbing my pregnant belly and imagining all of the beautiful potentials. And then the moments of birth, that last decan of Pisces, that actual moment, is screaming and agony and pushing and pressure and pain and turmoil, potentially death, right? Like, it really is like the spear of Mars bursting forth and like making life happen. And it's very destructive and bloody and hard and like scary. And so it's interesting because at this decade you have like, what are you willing to fight for to make this dream a thing, right? You say you want to incarnate and be a real person and do real things and have a journey. Well, now's your chance, right? What are you going to give up to do that? How hard are you going to fight for it? And so it's really interesting because, yeah, literally the hanged man is like the sacrificial lamb, right? Sometimes the hanged man is an allusion to Jesus or Odin, both of whom were spiritual figures who were tied up and upside down and stabbed with a spear. Odin was tied to a tree and he did it of his own volition to acquire the wisdom of the runes. And Jesus did it technically, I guess, also by his own volition because he was in on it and was fine with it. But, you know, he was crucified. So, you know, to alleviate the sins of man. But either way, it's like, what sacrifice? Odin sacrificed his eyes and for knowledge. Jesus sacrificed his life for the purity of mankind's soul. So when we get these kinds of situations, we get like, ooh, what are you willing to sacrifice to make this happen? And it's fun too because in the other context, we had that nice Knight of Pentacles in there, which wasn't, it kind of mellowed the reading, right? Because this is theoretical, academic, like what you might take of this. But when we had the Knight of Pentacles, it was like, okay, bring it down to earth, slow, mundane, diligent work, right? Are you willing to put in the work to get the fruits of this labor? You know, like, are you really willing to kind of just put aside ego and just do the thing? Which maybe is a message to me to be like, hey, whether you pass the exam or fail the exam, you have to be able to pass the exam to handle the material. So you might as well just do it and find out. But, which I know is true, but, I've studied so much. This is very validating. Yeah. It's sort of like, you know, things will begin to become clear. This is another thing too with the hanged man, because it's like, you know, literally seeing the light, understanding like why you sacrifice something. I think it's important to note that when people give up a lot in pursuit of this like beautiful dream, whatever it is, they have some idea of what the payoff will be, but you never actually know until you do the thing and get the reward or not, right? Like, you don't know how that's going to feel, or, you know, you hope that it's going to be good, but you're not sure. So the idea of like, what's year 2 going to be? It's like, oh, you know, we're going to begin to understand like what it is we have actually been fighting and sacrificing for, which, in, you know, because we're talking about academic stuff, is probably like, oh yeah, time, right? Belief, studying things. I think it's hard for a lot of people to really invest time and labor into astrology because, you know, it is still a thing that a lot of external forces might tell you is like, yeah, like, oh, it's woo woo, it's bullshit, it doesn't make any sense or whatever. Obviously, I disagree with those people pretty strongly at this point, but still, like that, you know, you might, depending on who you go and talk to, you might be looked at like a crazy person, which is another thing that happens with the hanged man. It represents like, you know, the mystic is often looked at like a crazy person. So you do sacrifice a lot of this kind of belonging to the dominant culture's perspective, which is a hard thing to let go of for some people. And it's even harder if it's like, you know, if it is actively putting you in dangerous or uncomfortable situations. So it's nice because, well, I mean, we've already seen, like, just you and I as being part of this astrology group, like, it's really validating to be able, like, I predicted my sister's move, you know, like, that's pretty fucking cool. But those are just little like glimpses, I think, of the kind of thing that ultimately you're striving for that has this payoff. So but yeah, anyway, should I pull? I'm gonna do one more thing because I got distracted again. But yes, let's look at a year 2 fundamentals of astrology. If it's relevant, it'll come back and we will just see. Ooh, well, this guy came back, so we're still doing the labor. We're still doing the labor. Oh, and we got the nine of fucking what's it called? Coins. Sorry, I curse way too much now. My husband's finally starting to rub off on me. He curses like a sailor, and I never used to curse, but now I do it so casually. But anyway. Dude, you do not want my student loans, attorney, but still. Oh God, yeah, that's another thing too. You know, when I signed up for Austin's course, I was in a much different financial position than I am now. And I am really worried about being able to pay it also. Like passing the test is one thing, but actually paying for enrollment into year 2 is kind of another. And I mean, I can't say it wouldn't be worth it. I definitely got a lot out of Austin's course, and I still do, you know, but I don't know. I guess loans are an option. But yeah, definitely business has not been quite booming the way I would like, but it's fine. Anyway, so this is kind of an interesting spread. So it's a good thing that we're doing this live too, because I'll be able to look back on this and see how things go. But I was really trying to focus my mind a little bit for just general vibes for year 2. So this is another challenge with tarot. It's such a big question, right? Are we talking about, Austin's life and how that might influence year 2? Because he's got a baby, he's got a book he's doing and hopefully finishing. He's got his own little life. There's all the TAs have their lives, different things, different like social political things might influence the class, or if there are delays or something like that. And then there's each individual student. So asking, like, it's easier to ask how year 2 will go for like, for Kuri Star or for Zia or for Austin than it is the general. But I think that this will be a really interesting take, because after year 2, we'll be able to see like, was this what happened? Or like, what is this specifically pointing at, right? Because in my experience, tarot really takes the top notes of things. But the more general, obviously, the more that is left unsaid by, with the nuance. But we still do definitely have diligent labor. Here we also have the moon's decan of Libra. And so one of the things that also known as the Two of Swords, I should specify for people who might not know that, but AKA. So the moon's decan of Libra is interesting. Austin's book, 36 Faces, did a really cool job of like illustrating this. And I think in my mind, the way I visualize it is like, so the moon is all about comfort, and Libra is about, it's the air sign ruled by Venus. So it's like cerebral, social harmonies and pleasures and beauties. Justice comes out of the social aspect of Venus, because it's like, yeah, when everybody agrees to play by the same rules and generally not go around killing each other, it's easier to, first of all, create beautiful works of art and culture, which Venus loves. It's also easier to do sex and pleasure, which Venus loves. It is also easier to just do everything, to play the game, right? It's more fun. Ideally, it's more fun to live in a society where we all, at least on the surface, pretend to give a shit about what's fair and what everybody gets, It's like how nobody wants to play a game of Monopoly when it's like stacked against you. Nobody wants to play a game that is intrinsically unfair. And really, society is a game we play. All of the constructs, all of the social things we decide to do, it's kind of a gamble, it's kind of a game. It's like, these are the rules, right? The rules of social interaction in accordance to the ethic morality of a specific culture at a specific time. And part of the beauty of the scales as being the avatar for justice is the idea that, like, yeah, they go up and down, like, according to your culture at your time. I don't know, being a certain color, a certain orientation, a certain race or gender might put you in an advantage. And it might be totally different even 20 years later, or not to mention at a different, in a different culture entirely. So the social things that are like acceptable or that get you put in jail, right? Like if you're a certain tax bracket, you can cheat the system all you want and get off scot-free. But if you're not, you don't. So it's like, these kinds of things oscillate and they need constant adjustment. And it's sort of the nature of this cardinal sign to kind of get things moving in the right direction based on like logic, reason, and intellect, with the under the auspice of Venus to try to make things fair and pleasurable. But, it's a mind thing. It's an air thing. It can be easily corrupted by smoke and pollution and change and all that stuff. Saturn exalts in Libra because it's easy to take advantage of. When you have these like theoretical hierarchies and then you implement material structure and old rules and old archetypes, like I think part of the reason Saturn exalts in Libra is because it's very easy to corrupt justice. It's really easy to get up there and fuck shit up, but also because, right, ideally you'd be removed and impartial and you'd be able to make, clear decisions without any kind of personal bias. And sometimes for the sake of the greater good or for the sake of maintaining justice, you have to, like as a judge, I imagine, you have to make rules or rulings that don't feel good, but nevertheless, right? Nobody's above the law. So whether you like a person or not, you have to be willing to say, nope, this is unacceptable. We have to act accordingly. And also be able to face like some pretty gnarly, I think. So I don't know. Saturn has its place in Libra. I'm not trying to like knock it or anything, but I do think that's kind of part of it, right? Like, being in control of the way people think and perceive the rules is really good for Saturn, who likes the rules and he wants to impose rules, restrictions, limitations, confinement, and also has this kind of stint toward corruption and toward like being powerful in a very old kind of enduring way. So I think being at the helm of Libra, where it's masked by Venusian good and pleasure, but also kind of like firmed by Saturn's, really really heavy taskmaster mindset, like it makes sense why he's exalted there. But depending on other circumstances, I think that could go really good or not so good. Just depending. So anyways, oh, look, we got this all stuff. AI is totally screwed up online advertising. Oh yeah, it's really hard. My brother's been helping me with advertising, but it's not going so great. The very best judge I've ever worked with constantly reminded themselves that they are biased versus go, I am definitely not anything biased because I don't think of myself that way. Yeah, totally. I call that the I'm not biased bias. It's 100% better to recognize that you happen to lean a certain way and then to try to adjust accordingly in the circumstance than it is to just be blind to your own corruptions, right? Like everybody has some kind of emotional bias. It's just a part of being human. So when you don't acknowledge it, you can't get in front of it. You can't mitigate it in any kind of way. So it's important to do that. But anyway, sorry, going back to the Two of Swords. So the Two of Swords, the moon is about comfort though, right? A lot of the times the Two of Swords shows up when you are maintaining comfort at the expense of justice, right? You're looking the other way because you don't want to make a big deal or rock the boat. So conversely, the Two of Swords can also, it represents that, how do I say, that duality, right? At a certain point, the internal conflict of going against your own ethical moral code will become more uncomfortable than the externalized conflict by proposing something that goes against the status quo or the external or the group, right? Like, for example, you might go with your friend to a party and they might make some off-color jokes that are obviously, to you, it's obvious that they're offending some people or hurting some feelings. And at first, maybe you're like, okay, well, the party mostly is good. They're kind of, the other person's sort of laughing it off. Like maybe we'll just kind of let it go and see what happens. So that's like the moon in Libra, right? It's like, I would rather be comfortable and maintain social harmony than necessarily act or do something about it. So we'll just kind of see. But at a certain point, like let's say your friend keeps making these jokes and the other person is getting more and more visibly upset. At a certain point, your own sense of internalized comfort is going to outweigh how much it's worth to just like sit there and watch this happen, right? So it's kind of like the Two of Blades can be ignoring justice for the sake of comfort. It can also be that ignoring justice for the sake of comfort has become so internally uncomfortable that now you kind of have to make a decision and take a stand and say something. So usually when I see this card, it's kind of that. It's like, well, we really want to figure out how we can get this to feel the best whether that's looking the other way or not. So this is why the moon is sort of looking like an eye that's opening, gets, showing partial rays. This is also a plant called eye bright, which is said to enhance the eyesight and grant mental clarity. Also the praying mantis, right? He blends in and he waits, he watches for like the opportune moment and then strikes. And this is kind of the thing we get with the two of cups, or sorry, I don't know, two of cups, always cups, two of swords. This is what we get with the two of swords. We are at kind of an impasse, right? We're weighing one against the other. We're seeing what would be more comfortable, what would yield a better result, and we're kind of trying to figure out the situation. So there's a place for that. I mean, there is, right? You kind of have to wait and see. You have to hold your tongue, you have to figure things out. As far as what I know contextually about year two, and I mean, like we've talked about this too in like my astrology book club. Like they don't really want you to look at outside sources for astrology information until like specifically directed. And I wonder if this is about like, hey, like don't, they want you to look at something very specific. So you're going to have to look the way on other things, or like maybe not talk about those things as much. Or there's something about, I don't know, maybe feeling like there are certain things that you can or can't say because of like social pressures or expectations, which could be like, yeah, don't bring up stuff that isn't relevant to the class. It could be like, oh, there are delays or setbacks because of, various life events. And even though it's not fair, we kind of are going to be compelled to just go with it, or like offer some grace in the situation. Something that's not fair might happen, and we might have to kind of like sit on it and figure out how to get that to work. So I don't know. There's so many different ways. I guess we could ask for some more clarity on that. So we say something won't go fair. So what way does something not go fair? Oh, I'll be juggling year two with high school and still a little worried both might go to shit since the focus is divided. Oh, yeah. That's a great reading for the Two of Swords, because literally the swords represents the intellect, i.e. focus, and you're divided between two things. So that's a fair enough interpretation right there. But let's just say, like, what about justice is reversed? Like, what is not going well with justice? What's up with that? Could be a cultural thing. Could be like, oh, some crazy thing is imposed that somehow does something that affects the class. I can't even imagine I don't know. Maybe they decide to make astrology illegal again. I mean, I hope not. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. Okay, so what about this justice reversed? Okay, so we have the Page of Pentacles reversed, the Knight of Wands reversed, the King of Pentacles reversed, and the Five of Swords reversed. Okay, so these I'm going to keep to the side because, they still might be relevant for context, but we're really trying to focus in on why is justice out of balance right now? Or for year two, I suppose. No, please. I know, right? Sorry, I shouldn't even say that. It's just that historically that America and other, how do I say this? The reason that Europe has not had a great foundation of astrological building since antiquity is usually because various versions of Christianity decide at various times that it's like evil and illegal and maybe too pagan depending on the time and culture. And so they kind of like put a no-go on it. And so it's not like it hasn't happened before that astrology and divination and other things like that were like socially unacceptable, which might affect something. But I don't really think that's going to happen, to be honest. I really think it's going to be more like there is some kind of setback or some kind of, well, hold on, let me drink some coffee really quick. So I'll also open up the chart too. Let's look at the sky right now. Do you happen to remember the date for when year two starts? I think it's like supposed to be sometime. Was it supposed to start in June or not? I don't remember. There was a boom in the Nazi era. Hitler was super into the occult. That's true. Hitler was super into the occult. Which is another thing too. Like, I was just lamenting with my sister about Nazis being involved and appropriating everything left and right. Like they do it a lot to like Celtic and Nordic mythology, but they do it to Greco-Roman mythology a bit too. And like, because even like the swastika was originally not like a sign of Nazi stuff. It was, I think it was like a Buddhist symbol of like peace or immortality or wisdom or something like that. I don't really remember, but yeah, and then they appropriated it and like kind of reversed it slightly, and so now that symbol is like kind of ruined for those Asian cultures that originally had it. I mean, it's not ruined, it's still theirs, but it, you know what I mean? Like it has a different connotation in the West than it otherwise would have had. And they're also like infiltrating like pagan spaces a lot, and it's very, very frustrating. And like for example, so like they really latched on to the goddess Ostara, who may or may not have ever really existed. Ostara I have a whole blog post on it and stuff, and you can find a bunch of information on it. There's somebody I follow called on Instagram called Jewwitch on Instagram, and she talks from the Jewish perspective of Ostara and like how, but anyway, the point is Nazis really, for whatever reason, really liked this proto-European goddess that really was only ever referenced by like one monk in the Middle Ages, and he's guessing about it, like with conjecture, so it's not really clear. She probably was a goddess of some sort, but like we have almost no information about her. And well, Nazis for whatever reason really took it and ran. I guess they had like a Nazi magazine in Germany called Ostara and all this stuff. So in particular, like, Nazis kind of infiltrate pagan communities and try to make it like evil and stuff, which is really upsetting. And when I made the children like the Wheel of the Year, obviously I was not doing, and like also the children, like, okay, so the Wheel of the Year is like a neo-pagan reimagining of like ancient pagan kind of cultures that celebrated things around the equinoxes and solstices and the cross quarter points, usually from European like Celtic kind of pantheons. And they wanted to reconstruct that, but really there was very little to work with because of Christian erasure. And so there is a lot of like filling in the gaps. I mean, Ostara was given the name Ostara because, some Wiccan basically felt that it needed a name, which I agree with. Like, if you want to try to elevate these certain calendar dates, which across culturally have always been very important because they're, literal celestial phenomenon that are noticeable and affect your day-to-day life, you're gonna notice them and probably celebrate them, particularly when you live in a world where your gods are personifications of the forces of nature. So it makes sense. But anyway, and so he gave it the name Ostara, and then there were also during that time, like in the Romantic era, it kind of sparked the inspiration a lot. So they were creating like new myths about this goddess that may or may not have really existed. And so it's nice in a way because, so the spring equinox is always about rebirth and regeneration, and like rabbits go crazy around March, and there's all this fertility of the land that happens when like the plants start coming back. So it makes sense that basically all of the celebrations around this time in the northern hemisphere are about fertility and rebirth and resurrection. So Easter did not come from like Ostara. It may have used certain like, I don't know, aspects of pagan cultures that predated Christianity, but we don't really have any record of what those were. So we don't know how much Easter may or may not have been informed by what we would call Ostara, but probably wasn't called Ostara by the pagans worshiping those things or having those holidays at those times. So anyway, there's a lot of gaps, right? Because of erasure and different cultural like perceptions and stuff. And so I was having this conversation with my sister because like I'm not Wiccan, like that's its own specific thing, and I would define myself as like an eclectic practitioner, and I definitely want to acknowledge the solstices and the equinoxes and the cross quarter points upon which all of tropical astrology is hung. Like it's very cool and grand and noticeable, and I do think it deserves its own name. And also the Children of Ostara sounds better than the Children of the Spring Equinox in my opinion. And I don't know what else I'd call it, but I was like, damn, if the Nazis are really going ham on this thing, like, should I just abandon this naming system? And like, the Wheel of the Year means something different to me as someone who is not Wiccan than somebody who is Wiccan. This is probably true. But it still does, I feel like it's a really kind of beautiful reconstruction of this old feeling of trying to get in tune with nature and her cycles and the different things that happen, and like taking that and elevating it from the mundane into something that is like spiritually centered or focused. So anyway, so I keep going through these huge like inner debates of like Do I keep the names of the Wheel of the Year, and then at the end I'll make a big grimoire and I'll explain all of this stuff, and I'll talk about like specifically what the Sabbats mean to me personally as like a identifying pagan, but not an identifying Wiccan, and God knows not a fucking Nazi. Oh my God. Ugh. I mean, it's so frustrating, right? Obviously, Nazis are horrible for so many fucking reasons, but do they have to spread it around? Like, it's just everything. Like, okay, so one of my favorite numbers is 11, and my rising degree is 8, and eight's always followed me around all of the time. And so the sacred numbers of like, oh, 11, 22, 33, like that's cool. And so I was like, oh, so 88 will be a cool number, but no, because they did some stupid Nazi code, and now it's some kind of thing to Hitler or whatever. It's so annoying. I mean, like I said, they commit literal atrocities, so this is probably pretty minor on the list of things that they do. But it really, it's so upsetting how it just like, it's not enough to try to like kill an entire group of people, to erase entire groups of cultures or religions. You also have to like taint things that actively exist in like the intellectual and spiritual as well. Like it just doesn't end is the problem. I mean, well, is one of many, 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 many problems. But anyway. Children of the pollen season, right? Exactly. So it's frustrating. I don't know. I kind of, in recent years, like the more I encounter it, and I started the Children of the Wheel series like 8 years ago. So at that time I was really starting to explore my spirituality in depth. Anyway, it's become a real point of contention internally. Like, I don't know, do I abandon it because it's ruined? But isn't that just giving up? Isn't that just letting them have it? Like, that's not, if you don't make other associations that are not tied to this thing, then that's all it'll ever be known for. At the same time, I definitely don't want to, like, I don't know, 60, 50, 100 years later, if God's willing, my art survives that long, I don't want to be, like, accidentally conflated with a Nazi. So I'm going to be really obvious about that. But, I don't know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know, like, at what point is an idea forever changed. Like, I don't know. I remember hearing once that there were certain Greek philosophers that would like create an entire language that was unique to them, so that they specifically could talk about a thing without it being tainted by like the connotation or the implication of the word from other people's understandings. And I was like, dude, I thought that was so absurd when I first heard that, but I'm starting to get it. I'm starting to get it. Yeah, children of the flowering season, children of the spring. I've never liked the spring as a title. Like autumn is beautiful, winter is lyrical, summer sounds really good, but spring always makes me think of like a slinky, like a doing doing doing, like that kind of spring, the coil. I'm like, why can't it have another name? Like fall has 2 names. Fall, you can say autumn instead, but anyway. And for some reason, that's important to me. I want it to be lyrical. And I think Ostara does give it that kind of like, the goddess wiped away by, by history and then reimagined and rebirthed into this new thing. Like that is very much kind of the premise of that season, right? Life and death and rebirth. Like she was erased and then brought back from erasure by really like Brothers Grimm's and other folklorists and like people making new myths about her. And it's unfortunate that some of those people are Nazis, apparently, but, and I mean, and that's the other thing is like Nazis did not come up with Ostara. They did not come up with that goddess or theorize about her. And even like by the time that like the pagans were putting Ostara as a Sabbat on the Wheel of the Year, like I don't even think that was necessarily, I don't know. Well, I guess I can't say. I'm not clear on the total timeline, but the point is they specifically took that one and ran with it, but they didn't like invent it. So anyway, it's just, it's frustrating. So let's see. Oh, enrollment is Jupiter in Cancer. So July is when it starts. Oh, okay, right. Getting back on track. July. Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I do remember it being about Jupiter in Cancer. Sometime in July. Although Jupiter goes into Cancer by June 10th, he's in Cancer. But maybe there's something. Sorry, am I missing the... Anyway, I wanted to see if there was like any kind of... Well, it's hard too because I don't know how long will it go even. Anyway, I'm getting really distracted. I'm just not going to give my opinion about how well our current admin is at doing Christianity, given the RFK Jr. seems to believe in faith healing or something. Yeah, my goodness. Let's see here. Have a friend who is a kimono dealer. Oh, that's cool. Resale, very up and up, and she has to deal with, yep, I can't sell this. Got a sun wheel on it. That's funny. They also really liked Taiwas, which annoys me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're really big onto runes. Yeah. Nazi, especially, that's why I say, like, in my experience within the pagan community, it seems to be like Celtic and Nordic mythology that they gravitate towards, which was, but it's still, it sucks because those are like very perfectly valid mythologies. I don't know. Like, it just sucks to have, like, and that's just something you have to be aware of, right? Like if you're in a pagan space or really and in the cult spaces too, like lots of Nazis like astrology, like we mentioned, like Hitler and stuff. I mean, you have to be careful when you're saying something and when another person is saying something, just to know like that there's a potential out there that you are not saying the same thing, right? Like when I am trying to venerate Ostara as like a time of rebirth and cleansing or purity, I'm not talking about Rachel purity. Okay, I'm talking about like the flowers are blooming, like the snow in some places is melting, new life and stuff. Like the rabbits are mating and babies are being born. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So yeah, you just have to be careful. You just never know who you're talking to. They tried to justify their rule, and since they weren't born royalty, thus appointed by God, they had to try and find another way. Yeah, totally. Like constructing this mythic archetype of this like superior thing that never was. Yeah, it's for sure. But yeah, bunnies boing around in the spring. They do. They do. I just call it the Children of Bunny season. I mean, what the hell? But yeah, I was really thinking of that sound and then realized, yeah, that boing boing. Anyway, so as far as like what's not working for year 2 of astrology, of the astrology class. So we do have the Page of Pentacles reversed. This makes me think, I don't know, do you think it's possible enrollment could be low? I mean, pages are trying to learn, or you know what, more likely, because the pages are of the earth element, we're dealing with material limitations. It's possible that a lot of people might have trouble affording year 2. I mean, I'm in that situation. I know one of my astrology book club friends is in that situation. I mean, I think she's still going to do it, but it's going to be hard. So it stands to reason that as the economy kind of tanks, more and more people will have fewer and fewer funds for that kind of discretionary or educationary spending. So I wonder if that might be an issue, or maybe even Austin has trouble with funds or something like that. That could be a problem. And it's a lot of court cards here, which makes me think that there are problems that specific people will have that might make things happen that are just kind of objectively unfair. This is another thing too. When the justice reverse shows up, it's always like, yeah, that's not fair. That's not like, why did that have to happen? And a lot of the times, not always, but very frequently, it's some kind of external, like from on high, like a government thing, right? Okay, so for example, I sell tarot decks and, there's all this talk about tariffs. Somebody literally just emailed me last night in Canada being like, hey, are there tariffs from your country? Because this is going to influence whether or not I can buy from you. And now I have to research all this shit about tariffs that I had no idea. I mean, I don't know. Yes, probably. But the point is like, that's not fair to me. I know there's all these justifications about why it's good or bad or whatever. I'm not an economist. I can't tell you if it's good or bad or whatever. I suspect probably not good, but that, like I said, I'm not really qualified to talk on the matter. But the point is, this outside issue, this outside matter of law that I think is unfair and dumb is now influencing my ability to do business, and I have really no power to do anything about it. It's like the way the social wind is blowing, right? It's cardinal air sign. It's just an idea some guy above me had, and now I have to deal with it. So I get that. I get those situations a lot with justice reversed. If you're ever like at court or doing a trial thing and you get justice reversed, it's pretty obvious, right? Justice was not held. Justice got reversed. Sometimes they call it a miscarriage of justice. Somebody who won shouldn't have won. Sometimes this can be about getting away with something, but usually it's like something is not happening and it's not really a fault. It's just not going well. So I could see financial setbacks being a problem. There's also the Knight of Wands reversed. I talked about that a little bit. So the Knight is all of the Knights in tarot in a Rider-Waite-Smith system that I like to use, how I use them, is the triplicities and the triplicities. So all of the Knights are of the air, and then the Knight of Wands is fire and air. So this is really like fanning the flames of this kind of Knight archetype. And then we think, what do Knights do? Okay, well, knights go out and solve problems or undertake quests at the behest of those who are in their social betters, like their social betters, right? Like the king or queen or something. So they're problem solvers. They go out, they do the work, they rescue the princess, they slay the dragon, they get the Holy Grail, right? Those are the things that knights do. When you're the Knight of Wands, you do that with your will, with your determination, your ambition, your passion. So you might be somebody that someone hires to like help you solve the problem, right? Like, I don't know. What's a very Knight of Wands thing? Maybe you hire a marketer or like a marketing team, and they're supposed to really like hype you up and make you visible and like and get you, make your product look really exciting. Maybe that's kind of crossing the Knight of Wands with the Knight of Pentacles a little bit because money's involved, but maybe you have a friend who's like going to go out and try to like rally the forces and make people like happy or something. Maybe it's like a TA who's super passionate about something who's maybe not able to attend, or maybe they're running. Oh, they could be running thin on manpower is another thing. Like maybe the classes become labor intensive to the point where it's difficult to accommodate everybody's needs, and it's like maybe they don't have enough TAs to do the time zone underdogs, or maybe the scheduling gets disrupted somehow, or like the crew is spread too thin, or they're trying to cover too much ground. Sometimes the Knight of Wands can be very much about like spreading yourself too thin, kind of trying to tackle all these obstacles because like, yeah, I'm so hyped to do it, but you don't have the fuel to do it. It can also be about acting kind of impulsively or irrationally, like just, you like see, I don't know, like 18 different problems and you're like, okay, this, now this, now this, now this, kind of that, and there's no like direction or like real big plan. So that could be a factor. And we're getting another, like these two are both pentacles, and then we have this one, which is fire, and in between. So it seems like there's going to be a financial or material situation that kind of stops things a bit, gums stuff up, makes it difficult. Yeah, because it's really like what happens when you pour, earth on a flame. It kind of poops out. So, I rate Robin season. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. So I don't know. Do you guys think I should rename the Children of the Wheel series? I do like the Wheel of the Year. I really think it's a beautiful kind of romantic, and it's like, on the one hand, I like the gaps in the pagan mythologies because it gives you room to like build your own thing and make a spirituality that suits you and is catered to you and your interpretation and your understanding. Because yeah, we really don't know. Like, European was colonized by Christians first. They did it to themselves and they did it the most thoroughly. And so the things that were there before, we really don't have very much information about it. We know based on either like Christian monks writing stuff about the pagans that existed before them, or like their conquerors saying, basically propaganda against them, or other people kind of mentioning. But most European pagan cultures didn't have like a written system really. They were more oral. They were more about oral transmission. So they, told stories, and their gods were more animistic and related to like the specific environment that they lived. So, if you lived next to like a well or a spring of clear water that was, relevant and a good source of life for you, that well would have like a deity associated to it. And you would go to that well and you talk to that spirit, literally the beginnings of the wishing well fairy tale trope. A lot of pagan practices did probably and undoubtedly get absorbed into other practices, like the idea of blowing out birthday candles and wishing for things, and wishing on the moon or wishing on stars. All of those things have at least correlating Greek counterparts, like where People would, offer cakes and blow candles and ask for wishes of Artemis on her sacred day, like as being a birthday kind of tradition. So stuff like that has happened. Like cultural transmission just does occur, but we just don't know that much for a fact. We don't have that much written proof. The same thing that allows Nazis to take things over is the stuff that I actually do like about it. Like there's a lot of room to kind of imagine what it could have been. And I think imagination is one of the greatest assets of mankind, just period, full stop. Like it's such a beautiful, wonderful thing to engage with. But like any ocean, it's got its dangers. It's unfathomably deep and it lures people and they get lost out in the sea. And so, the same problems, the same issues that Nazis use to make their imagined one race mythos is kind of the same basic gap in knowledge in history that I use to insert my own interpretations of like Greco-Roman, Celtic, Nordic myths and stuff. So it's not that the gaps are intrinsically bad. I guess a gap is only as bad as the thing you fill it with. But I also don't want to be associated with all that bullshit either. Like it means something different to me clearly than it means to them. So I don't know. It's hard. I don't know. It's like there's a personal standpoint, but then there's also like a business standpoint, right? Like, is this going to be a problem in the future? Are people going to think that it means something that it doesn't mean when I say it or when I release these decks? Like, it's it's a problem. I don't know. I don't. Anyway, sorry. I'm getting really distracted now just by the premise of Ostara, but it's been on my mind a lot lately because I'm like, I'm only 2 decks into the Wheel of the Year series that I started when I was first really getting into my own spirituality. If I'm ever going to change the name, it's only ever going to get harder. But I really love the Wheel of the Year. I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's a cool component. Like, I do think the solstices and the equinoxes deserve their own names, and those names are evocative. I mean, we're talking about it right now. Like, they're cool. They make you think, like, oh, what would that have been? I think that's kind of the point of a lot of these stories and mythologies. It's like a surviving record of people that existed. We don't know them, but we know they were there because we know something about these stories, even if we don't have the full picture. And I don't know. I don't know. Oh, Jojo says, no, please don't. Yeah, don't let them win. Oh, thanks. Yeah, marketing wise, it's something people understand easily. I hope so. Well, we have a pretty unanimous don't rename it, so I don't really want to be honest. Yeah, you don't need to start writing for Luna or anything. It's just accessible to like your client base. The Romans were great. We'll just tack that on. Take a lot of religious studies as an academic subject with Harvard divinity professors in college. Can totally blame the Romans. They were just like, sure, we'll just add that thing. And since everybody likes these holidays, emperor is now Christian, we'll just make it work. Yeah, I mean, I do think that like throughout history, you do have a lot of examples of culture share and merging and like assimilation and that whole synthesis. And I do think like, Greeks and Romans were pretty notorious for incorporating like other people's gods into their pantheon. It's suggested that that's one theoretical reason why Zeus now, to our perspective, seems so like, I don't know, like bipolar or something, like multiple personalities. Because anytime that there was like a local city state or tribe or whatever, and they had like a pantheon sky god, they'd kind of absorb him into Zeus. And so then the goddess consort or wife or whatever of that local divinity would also be one of his like, sexual conquests or, people that he cheated on with Hera, basically. So then you have all of these little like mini fertility goddesses and mini things or whatever that all have some claim to Zeus because of their assimilation from different cultures, and that's why Zeus today is like so everywhere. But it's just, and also I think I read somewhere once, and I don't have the sources for this, so sorry, but I read somewhere that the early Greeks thought that was funny and they didn't mind it, but the later Greeks started to take themselves and their mythos a lot more seriously and then really didn't like it, and they wanted Zeus to be like the Jupiter we talk about in astrology, that's like benevolent and with good judgment and spiritual and like, like a good guy, not just like a chronic adulterer. And so they tried to like come up with ways to frame it that would be better. And I think that's honestly so funny. It's kind of like when you do a D&D campaign, but you don't really plan that much. And so you have to kind of just work with this weird, like giant ball of lore that you just created as you went. And so now you're like, oh shit, none of this makes sense actually. It's really funny. Yeah, now Zeus has all the women and his wife are angry. Exactly. Edith Hamilton, I think Robert Graves both made that argument. I'd have to check. Yeah, thank you. I don't know. I'm so bad with names. I like read something and I'll remember the information, but I have to read it multiple times from the same source before I start to remember who said it. And that's a big problem for me. That's one of my I have to check myself a couple times because, I mean there's so much information now and you don't know. Luckily, I think I'm pretty good at like reasonably kind of figuring out what is more or less logically to have been the case, right? Like I don't just believe anything. I don't know. As they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So it's, I think it's reasonable to think that well, and also probably people are people, right? Probably there were people who took really big issues with it, and probably there were people who didn't mind as much. It just kind of depended who you were. And it's so frustrating because even of all the Greek myths we have, it's like a sampling of only a couple people, really. So who knows what everyone would have thought? Like, I mean, there might have been myths in Greco-Roman lore that were so ubiquitous and so spoken that nobody felt the need to write them down because they were like, oh, everyone knows that story. Everybody knows this, right? Like there are cases of stuff like that happening in history. So you never know, what gets erased and what doesn't. Sometimes something being too popular actually makes it not stick as well because everyone at that time knows about it. So why would you bother bringing it up again? But yeah, but that's not always the case. So we're collectively reclaiming witch. Let's reclaim the Sabbats as well. Yeah, I mean, agreed. That is my knee-jerk reaction. And I think ultimately what I'm going to probably do is I'm going to do all of the decks. And then at the end, I'm going to write a giant ass grimoire for the Children of the Wheel. And I think I'm just going to lead with a big foreword that talks about like how I am using the Sabbat and how my relationship with them and what I mean when I say like Ostara or Litha or whatever and not, and I think I might have to just, I know this is kind of cowardly or whatever. I have mixed feelings about almost everything, but one of my mixed feelings is on the one hand, I don't really want to take up space in my own writing by giving Nazis another platform. And I don't like them. I don't want to talk about them. And at the same time, I also recognize that like it's important to provide this context for people so that people know what they're getting into. Like when I was first exploring spirituality in pagan spheres, I did not know about Nazi appropriation and threat and dog whistles and stuff that they're really prevalent. They really are. And it would be beneficial, I think, as somebody with a little bit more experience now to maybe like let readers know, hey, there's this other interpretation that I absolutely do not mean, But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to dirty my writing with this ugliness. Like, I don't want it in there. But I feel like I'm obligated. I mean, I also don't want to, because it's one thing talking about general things of ugliness, right? There are ugly, dark, evil facets in every person. It's just human nature. We are made up of these extremes, and kind of most of us are in the middle somewhere and then pushed along by like, little fate or little urges or whatever. And we get to choose kind of how we want to manifest to our maximum good or maximum bad or in between or whatever. I don't have any problems talking about theoretical monstrosities or ugliness or whatever, but like pinning my work down by contextualizing it with a specific political movement, I don't know, something about that, it just irks me so bad. But I not to say, I do think there is a place for that, obviously. It's, I don't know. So I'm always torn about like how much specifically do we mention? Like this is a very specific problem and one that quite frankly, I'm not really qualified to talk about. I can give my opinions, but I'm not a political historian. I'm barely politically active in my own sphere. I just, do what I think is right according to the information that I have and obsessively fixate on it in the meantime. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like it's hard to know what to do really. So yeah, that's what endnotes are for. Do your narrative as you see fit, then go back and endnote what you have to. Yeah, as a disclaimer. Yeah, I mean, I do think it is important to let people know, like, there are other ways to interpret this thing. Like, it's big, it's open-ended, it's full of gaps. That is part of what makes it beautiful, but that's part of what makes it dangerous, too. So, you just, something to be aware of. Anyway, yeah, I wonder if there's going to be some kind of like financial or interpersonal like issue that happens with year 2 that makes it a little bit difficult or like slows it down. That isn't fair in that it's not a problem pertaining to any one student, person, teacher, but still they kind of have to figure out how to deal with. And then we have the 5 of Swords reversed, this is the Venus ruled decan of Aquarius. This is usually about like Okay, let me talk about the upright first because I think the context is important. When it's upright, so this is the peahen and these are the two peacocks and she's looking towards the star because it's like, I can do better. This is the idea of Aquarius as being from the outside looking in and Venus as being the motivator for going or trying something new. You know, usually Aquarius is being ruled by Saturn. It's cruel, it's aloof, it's zoomed out, but it's also very much like, what are new rules? What are the new things that we're trying to implement? Or like, can we do better? Or can we, like one story that both Susan T. Chang and Austin Coppock bring up in their respective books, The 36 Faces / The 36 Secrets, is the idea of the pilgrim or the immigrant, right? Like you leave everything you know behind in the pursuit that maybe you could get something better. And then you become a foreigner in a foreign land, like you become unknown. You might not speak the language. It's like a very precarious, difficult situation where you're isolated in that you're not part of that culture, but you're still seeing it and interacting with it and living with it. So you have a very unique perspective on what maybe could or could not or should not be done. But in the mundane sphere, a lot of the times this card comes up when you think you can do better, right? You're like, I think we can strive for a higher ideal. Like, I don't think this is as good as it gets. I think I can have something that's going to last longer, that be more enduring, be a better set of ideals. So when this card shows up, you might be fighting over ideals, fighting over ideologies, philosophies. You might be arguing your point. You might be like, well, I know best, so whatever. I don't need your opinion. You might go it alone or whatever. When this is reversed, though, I kind of sometimes think like, oh, you can't actually do better. Like this is just a situation that like would happen no matter what you did or like where you went. So seeing this card reverse in this context makes me think it's actually kind of positive because it's not like you're wasting your money on year two. It's just like, there's always something. There's always some kind of setback. So I wonder, and then Jojo says, I understand your frustration with having to discuss and prove one's stance at every turn because people automatically jump to the worst conclusions instead of giving the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Yeah, I sense that there's a at the same time coming. That is how I feel. It's frustrating to have to constantly contextualize yourself by the thing you don't like. That's something about that feels very unfair, you know? Let's just give like a little bit like interesting. Oh, well. So I was asking in my head, I was like, I still want like an overall view of like year two and if it'll be good or if it'll be like, is it going to be like a good time? And we got the 6 of Cups reversed and Strength upright. So this is kind of like, yeah, be patient. I think it will still be good. I think also this is the Sun's decan of Scorpio. It has a lot to do with like, I don't know, what you get is what you get. What you get out of it is what you put into it. Also nostalgia, also like cycles of expectations and things. I wonder if not everything will meet expectations, but still it's worth it to kind of like stick it out, like have strength, go for it. I do wonder too. I mean, like I took year one and that was super beneficial. And then I read Demetra George's what do they call this book again? I read her series about ancient astrology in theory and in practice, and she has 2 giant books about it. That was what I told you guys earlier that I was part of an astrology book club, so that's what we did. We read these 2 books by Demetra George. I really liked them a lot, and actually everything that Austin went over in his year 1 course was in those books in some way or another, at least I found. So on the one hand, I think there's a way to look at that and be like, oh, I didn't get my money's worth. But on the other hand, first of all, I would not have had that book club if I hadn't taken Austin's course. Second of all, I really like the way Austin thinks about things and synthesizes information. And I did nevertheless find his specific take on the planet science houses and aspects to be very useful. He also does provide like a backlog of lives that are archived so you can go in and like see more things. And, there's the whole like group community oriented aspect of it, so you get to ask and talk to more people and et cetera, et cetera. So I still do definitely feel like his courses give you your money's worth for sure, but I think there's a certain way of looking at it where like if your expectations are too high, you might be kind of disappointed, only in that, and we got this other card too, didn't we? before, yeah, right here. This this Knight of Pentacles. Um there's a lot of slow, basic, foundational learning that has to be done before you can really like jump into the deep end. And I say that as somebody who routinely jumps into the deep end without knowing how to swim almost all the time with every intellectual endeavor. So when I started exploring astrology, I was just like, I mean, I learned in the totally backwards assest order you could ever do something in. I was like, oh, transits are a thing. Oh, houses. Okay, I'm learning about the transits while I'm learning about the houses, while I'm learning about the signs, but I don't even know how to read a chart. And then, oh, this makes an aspect of that. So after having taken like his course in addition to reading those books and other books, and like now that I have been building my understanding and backing it against like a set of curriculum, a curriculum basically by people who know more than I do, the bits of information that I learned before are kind of falling into place and are becoming useful. But at the time it was so confusing, and I do not recommend that technique. It's just the way that I am, but I don't recommend it. So I don't know. So I do think there's a certain, like, when the strength card appears, it's like, this is Leo also, it's associated with Leo. But it's like, yeah, you know, you take the best you can get out of it. You put in the best you have, you get the most out of it. It's worth doing. You stick to it, you be patient. But I do think there's something about this that's like, there's an ego aspect to Leo and to strength that you're trying to kind of like overcome and integrate. It's not the best, it's not the worst. You just need to figure out like the genuine, the authentic, and nurture that and kind of elevate it based on that, right? And not try to project too much a ego thing onto it. So, yeah, so that's the qualification for why things are unfair, right? It's sort of like I don't know, probably you're not going to learn all of the ancient wisdoms ever collected, but probably it'll still be good and worth doing, and mostly feel like worth it, right? Like genuine, authentic, right? I think that they're going to be giving it their best authentic effort to make it good, obviously. I think that's true. I do think there also will be some kind of setback that comes externally, and it seems likely that it's related to financial issues. Or, well, when we deal with pentacles, we're dealing with time, labor, money, education, right? Material stuff. So something, I think they might be running out of something, one of those things. They might have too many students and not enough teachers. Austin might have too many questions and not enough time to answer them. I mean, he's got a lot on his plate. I know for a fact having a young baby really throws everything out the window. Like your cycles get just totally wonkadoo and it becomes difficult. I mean, oh man, I mean, people talk about how being a parent is hard, but before my personal experience, it's like, okay, yeah, you know, whatever, but you still got to do your job and stuff, right? But it really changes things having like this precious thing that's totally dependent on you and only you, and well, you and your partner, but even so, that's still, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I think I think there could be like pretty day-to-day mundane kind of an issue, but I don't see anything super alarming or bad about this spread. I think it's still good. I think it's still going to mostly go well. So, and then let me go back to JoJo's comment. So she said, yes, I understand having your frustration with having to discuss and prove one's stance at every turn because people automatically jump to the worst conclusions instead of giving the benefit of the doubt. The whole innocent until proven guilty is rarely actively lived. No kidding, dude. Yeah. But it is unfair. People want others to give them the benefit of the doubt, but rarely want to give it to others. Also true. Yeah. Ancient astrology, totally. If you don't do it backwards, late, and by taking the goat path instead of the comfortable paved planned walk, it is not worth doing it through. Per me, I do everything like it. I love that Leo here is the dandelion. It's the official symbol of the American Military Department. Oh, cool. Yeah, military brats and former current. So that's all the time I have, and I can tell that my kids are approaching the house. I think they were playing with their cousins down the street, but I think it's time for me to go. But thank you guys so much for coming. I've never had like 3 people on these Patreon lives at the same time, so I'm so excited you're all here. It was really fun, and I would love to answer more of your questions next time. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you I'm going to remind you when we have 3 today. Usually I try to do one at the first Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning of every month and the last Friday at 10 o'clock at night of every month. But this one we have 3 because I missed last Friday because I completely forgot it was Friday. So we've just done this one on the 4th. There is another Patreon exclusive live coming up on Friday the 6th at 10 o'clock at night Pacific time. So if any of you guys want to be there, that'd be awesome. But if not, I understand. And then there will be another one on the 27th at Friday 27th at 10 o'clock at night Pacific time. And that'll be that. So I hope to see you there. So thank you so much. Bye, guys.